Hi everyone, today I'm going to give you a few tips on how to use colored pencils on black paper, and as usual I'm using Prismacolor Premier colored pencils, and the paper is Stonehenge paper, which is my preferred black paper because it has a nice tooth and it holds a lot of pencil layers. So I had traced my sketch with a white pencil on a piece of tracing paper, and I transferred it onto my black paper, so I ended up with a white line drawing which will blend in once I'm done working with my colored pencils. I never sketch straight onto my black paper because if I have any mistakes that I need to fix by erasing, it usually messes up the surface of the paper, so I usually transfer my drawings onto the black paper. And then I use a white pencil and I start building all the values of my drawing. So much like if you were doing a sketch on white paper with a graphite pencil, you'd be focusing on the values and emphasizing the shadows. This time I do the opposite. I still work on the values, however I emphasize on the lighter areas. So I do work alongside with a few cool gray pencils because on the white fur of the tiger there are shadowy areas, and I use a few cool gray pencils to define those shadowy areas. So a good portion of the time that I take drawing on black paper is spent by working with my white pencil. In this case, because it's a large drawing and it took me over 9 hours to complete this drawing, it took me quite a few hours to lay down that first layer of white. And before I start applying the colors, I will also go over some areas that are even more light, especially for the tiger. The tiger has a lot of areas with white fur, so I will add more layers of white to whiten the white fur and make it stand out even more. And the reason why I apply white all over the drawing is because I'm working on black paper and there are quite a few colors with colored pencils that are not opaque. Therefore, when you apply them on black paper, they will half disappear. They will kind of sink in. The black will absorb them. And so it's kind of the opposite when you work on white paper. It shines through the colors and makes them look brighter. The black really tunes down all those colors. So if you apply a layer of white beforehand, then once you apply the colors on top of it, the white of your pencil will shine through those colors and kind of form a barrier between the black of the paper and the colors that you've chosen. So to me, this first step is very important, and I usually take the most time working on that, being very careful. When I work on animals, I make sure that I really look at the reference picture and I look at the direction of the fur, and I make sure that I'm loose anyway doing this because I don't want the fur to look stiff and not real. So I'll just flick my pencil and not apply much pressure, because if I do, then I'll flatten the grain of the paper and I won't be able to add more layers afterwards. So I take my time, I do small strokes, and I try to overlap them here and there and not make them the same length, so that they really look natural. And again, I make sure that I don't push too hard on my pencil. And you'll see throughout this video that there are real-time parts so that you can actually get a feel for how fast I'm working, and hopefully you can tell how light my strokes are, because when you just see a sped up video you can't really tell how fast I put the pencil down. So it will give you a little idea, and show you that I really take my time and try to focus so that my strokes make the fur looks natural. Here again you can see of this portion of the stripe that I slowed down for you, that I don't just draw even lines next to each other. I try to follow the pattern that I see on the photo, overlap the lines, and I put the pencil down on the paper and start drawing the line, and then lift it up towards the end so that it looks wispy, so that it doesn't look like it ends right there. I'm not sure if it makes sense, but I kind of flick my pencil a little bit. Now that the first layer of white was applied, it's time to add the colors. So for the cub, I decided to start with the darker colors, and I'm using a golden rod, and I go in the shadow areas of the orangey fur this time, and I apply it very lightly again. I'm gonna need many layers to make it look as realistic as I can. So the key for that is to add many layers. So if I push too hard on this second layer, I'm not going to be able to achieve that. So I'm going at just as light as with the first white layer, and I take my time. I make sure that I find all the darker areas on my reference photo, and I add the layers. I'm not as detailed as with the white layer because I've already established more or less the fur and the direction of the fur. So this is more like a wash, a light wash that I put on my white pencil strokes. So take it as a maybe just coloring. I'm just coloring over the white lines. The white lines still show through because again I'm not pushing too hard on my pencil. For the lighter areas, I'm using, for the lighter areas of the orange fur, I use yellow ochre, and when it's even lighter I'll use sand. And I'll apply those colors throughout the cub, again always keeping my eyes on the reference picture to know where to apply which colors. When that's done, I use a cool gray to add the shadows on the white fur. Again, that's just a light wash just to darken the white fur to give it a more 3D effect. And there is a wide range of cool gray pencils. I use them depending on what I see on my reference picture. So I'll start with the darker ones, maybe not all the way to the 90%. That I keep for the very dark areas that aren't black. But I go back and forth and I add some lighter cool grays to kind of do a gradient between the white in the highlighted areas and the darker shadows. And now that I have my second layer down, I'm adjusting the values. So I'll go back to the very white fur, the widest area of the cub, and I'll start pushing a little harder on my pencil. Then I'll try to find out where the lightest of the orange fur is, and I'll cover that with a light layer of white again, which I will cover again with the yellow ochre to make that color stand out even more. And sometimes when I work on a larger piece like this one, I might just stop working on an area and go somewhere else to avoid boredom. Now for the mom, I kind of worked backward, where instead of applying my light wash of color, I started working on the white fur, and so I added a thicker layer of white, and you can tell that I was trying to achieve a wispy look by flicking my pencil back and forth. And I'll also lighten some areas where I know that the orange fur will be lighter before I added the wash of color. And here again you can see how very light my first wash of color is, and how this step is a bit faster and easier than adding the white fur, because I'm only just coloring over the white lines. So a couple essential tools I also use when drawing with colored pencils is first a drafting brush, so that if I have little residue of colored pencils floating around on my paper, I can safely brush them off. But sometimes some of them are a little bit more reluctant to be brushed off, so I use some poster putty and just dab on it a little bit and it just comes right off. I never use my hand to brush it off because I risk just squishing the residue on my paper and leaving a mark that I will not be able to remove. And I'm also using a plain piece of printer paper to rest my hand on it because the drawing is so big. I don't want to smudge anything or damage anything. Alright, so here you can see that I'm adding colors on top of the white that I had put over the previous colored layers. So from now on, it's just going to be working out the balance between the values and adjusting my whites, adjusting my darks. I have actually added a bit of dark brown in some darker areas of the orange fur. I'll be going over the orange fur again with some white, just to be able to add more color over it and make it stand out even more. So again, it's really back and forth and back and forth, adding layers upon layers upon layers. And then I do the same with the white fur, where I constantly work between the cool grays and the white. And once the balance is pretty much established, then I pick up my black pencil and I draw fur back into the white or the orange fur, just to make sure that I show that it is indeed black fur, and it does have a wispy feel to it as well, that it's not just drowned underneath the white and the orange fur. So I do that with the Prismacolor black pencil with a very fine tip, and once I'm done, in the areas that are large enough, I use my Derwent drawing pencil, the black one, because it has a matte finish and it covers up the shine from the Prismacolor pencil. And once I've done the whole cub with the blacks, then I use a paper towel to even out the finish of the Derwent black drawing pencil. And I try not to go past the black lines too much, but if I do, it's okay. It might add an extra shadow element. In any case, I can always fix it by adding more layers of colors on top of it. So now I'm going through the same process with the mom. I'm adding more colors onto the orange fur, and I'll adjust it as I go depending if I need it lighter or darker. I'll add more white for lighter areas and add more of the either sand or yellow ochre on top of the white, and I'll use some goldenrod in darker areas as well as some dark brown. I also decided to add a little bit of grass so that those two wouldn't be floating in the air, although the cub is floating in the air kind of. But I'm just flicking my green pencil, I think it's an apple green, upward to make uneven lines to show that it's grass. And I also use white over some of those blades to lighten them, and then I'll cover them again with green, but that'll show some lighter grass blades. And I use also some darker green and a little bit of black as well, just to make a mix so that it's not all totally flat. And then it was time to work on those black stripes for the mom, just like I did for the cub. So I added the details with my very well sharpened Prismacolor black pencil, and on top of it I added the Derwent drawing black pencil. Once I was pretty happy with the values, I applied a couple of coats of fixative and let it dry, and that helps fix the colors and the pencils, the layers that I already put down. But it also adds an extra layer of grain to the paper, and it allows me to add more layers of pencils on top of it. So you can see now that the white pops even more than before, and the colors end up being much brighter as well. The contrast is much more pronounced, and by adding those extra few layers, it makes the fur look even more realistic. So that's it for today. Thank you all for stopping by. I hope you like this little tutorial. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.